Welcome everyone, this is On Just Restart. I am joined by my friend Nate from Nintendo Prime, and we're going to be talking about Breath of the Wild 2. As you can probably tell from the title, what we're talking about today is the true release date for the sequel to Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. And so it's entirely, painfully, totally clear. We don't know what the true release date is, unless Nate's holding out on me. But I don't think neither of us actually know. And I think most people don't actually know, right? But there's a lot of discussion for Zelda going on right now. We have the Nintendo Direct that is supposedly happening, that a number of insiders are saying is happening, some of which that we'll be referencing throughout this discussion. Nate the Hate, not to confuse with Nate from Nintendo Prime, but also Jeff Grubb as well. So there's definitely a lot of like Zelda hype going on right now. And I feel like this is a good time to kind of have this discussion about what the true release date is. Nintendo has told us spring 2023. It's already been delayed. This is the longest sort of gap we've seen between two mainline Zeldas ever. There's a lot of question marks here. And yeah, I just think this would be a really good talking point. So with that all said, Nate, what do you think is the true release date for Breath of the Wild 2?
That's a very good question. My thoughts are that seemingly every year of Switch's life, they have dropped a major release in March every year. And they do it either usually the end of the month, is usually when they drop it. So it kind of ends their fiscal year and then kicks off the next fiscal year really well. So no matter if the financials are good or bad, they can point to this thing and go, yeah, but this is selling incredibly well and this is going to push us into the next year. It's quite interesting when I think about that release timing, because not only does it make sense, I know some people are really pushing for March 3rd because it does happen to land on a Friday again, and that'd be the 6th anniversary. I'm not so sure that Nintendo cares so much about that sort of milestone, because whether it's March 3rd or, I don't know, March 24th, either way, it's still in March. They said spring of 2023. That's the official word from Nintendo. Technically, spring doesn't begin till the end of March. So end of March would fit in, at least Nintendo's current slate. And then there's the whole consideration of, some of the people you brought up, like Nate the Hate and others, sort of referencing that, hey, the last they heard was Switch Pro is also supposed to be early 2023.
Yeah, which is...
And would they line that up together at the same time? I know, separate discussion.
Yeah, I think I hear the screams outside and the torches and pitchforks. Like,
you know what's funny? I actually got to talk about it in a video this last week and didn't get yelled at. That's awesome. Thank you guys for not yelling at me. Anyone who watches my videos. So yeah, look, Zelda's known to be delayed all the time. It already got its big delay. Usually there's one, but there can be two because we technically don't have a date. Usually once we get an exact day, they don't delay off that day, but they will delay years. So 2022 delayed to 2023, early 2023, spring of 2023. But again, spring is not a release date. It's a 3-month window. It's a 3-month window. So I think that, assuming that that there's some truth to the rumors that we're going to see something about the game this month, to me that means no delay. It's coming spring, like they said, and it's going to land at the end of March. Because to me that means they're right on schedule. They have a direct path. They've had a big game every March. Last year was what? Monster Hunter Rise? Is that last year, 2021?
So 2021 was Kirby and the Forgotten Land, which is looking to be... No, I'm sorry. This year's 2022. Kirby and the Forgotten Land, which is looking to be the best-selling Kirby game yet. So I feel like it does sort of still fulfill that big game ending to close the fiscal year. 2021, to your point, was Monster Hunter Rise, which is the best-selling third-party game on Switch, I think.
2020 was Animal Crossing. We know about that.
And yeah, right. There's a big history here. 2017 was Zelda. I think there's another year where it was Kirby. I could double check that, but most of the years there's like a big game that comes out at the end of March to close Nintendo's fiscal year.
Yeah. So I feel like the timing lines up well. I think if we do see it at the Direct this month, that obviously lines up well. And I know the rumors are saying specifically we're going to get the title, which is obviously extremely exciting for a lot of people, especially since Eiji Aonuma himself said the title is a spoiler.
By the way, I confirmed Kirby Star Allies did come out March 2018. Okay. So we have pretty much a major game coming out every single March from Nintendo or from one of their partners, that being Capcom. So,
yep. So I feel like that lines up, especially if they already have a plan for a holiday title next year, which I assume they do. We obviously don't know what that title is at this point,
I do.
But I assume they have a plan. And giving Zelda that early year run, they saw it with Breath of the Wild, didn't hurt anything. They've had a lot of games perform really well, released early in the year. And that's the time slot that they release big games early in the year. Otherwise, they don't do it until like end of summer.
Yeah.
Is the next big release date timing. So I feel like if we see it this month, then March. If we don't see it this month, which means we might not see it the rest of this year, that's when people might start to wonder, are they really only going to give us a few months of advertising? I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah.
Technically, spring runs until the beginning of June.
Yeah, but that would be so strange.
That would be very strange.
It'd be so strange. I mean, so you guys know my stance, right? In case you haven't been listening to me recently, my stance is this: the first, or rather, my first thought is that it's coming out late March, as Nate is saying here, because it makes the most sense. We usually get a big game to close out the fiscal year. Breath of the Wild 2 has been positioned for that point. Nintendo has taken the time to give us a more specific release timing, not a specific day, but the fact that they boiled it down to a season, to me suggests that they are no longer expecting a delay. So with that said, I think that the most obvious conclusion is late March, considering the history of Nintendo releasing big games at that point, and us not knowing about anything else for that time. So that is like my first thought. But there are a few considerations. And something I want to clarify on, because I was kind of joking earlier while Nate was talking. I don't know what's coming out next holiday, right? But I expect it to be a Mario game. Why? Because I think we're in that territory, right? I think that with the movie coming out around, I think April is our actual release date for the movie. So there's going to be a big Mario movie. I believe there should be at least one major mainline Mario game coming out within a year of its release. Yep. And if we are to be getting new hardware sometime next year, something needs to be pushing that hardware. It's not going to be Mario Kart because we're getting DLC right now. It's not going to be Smash Brothers because the DLC just ended. So what else is left? It can't be Animal Crossing. Yeah. That just came out. The only other options left, at least based off history.
Yeah, the only way I see Mario not being released next year is if there is no new hardware next year and they're just going to go straight to Switch 2 in 2024, then they could delay it as a launch game.
Yeah.
But I don't know that. I mean, that's a possibility that's out there. I personally don't know anything about new hardware. I'm just reading what everyone else is reporting.
There's something else to consider here. Next year, if we assume that they treat Scarlet and Violet as they treated Sword and Shield, which I think is a safe expectation, we're not getting a new Pokemon game in 2024. We're going to get DLC. I'm talking about the mainline games. There could be a spin-off, but a spin-off is different.
The team that did Brilliant Diamond, Shiny Pearl might have something going.
Yeah, but so there's probably not gonna be a mainline release in the holiday, so it's more reason for Nintendo to have something else major, right? We go back to last year, 2021. Yeah, we got Metroid Dread. Yeah, we got SMT5. Yeah, we got the Mario Party game, but we also had Pokemon. So all that together was a solid lineup, right? But if we go towards, say, 2020, if we look at 2023, and there's no mainline Pokemon game, there's no mainline Zelda, there's no mainline Mario, maybe they could release Metroid Prime 4, but that alone is not going to really cut it, right? I think Nintendo's going to want something that has a likelihood of exceeding 10 million copies sold. So that's another reason to kind of think Mario is like a big bet for the next holiday. And with that in mind, assuming Mario is truly coming then, this is all relevant, that positions Zelda more for the earlier major game, right? But let's say Mario isn't coming out this holiday. Not this holiday, but next holiday, right? Then maybe Nintendo wants to position Breath of the Wild 2 as a big holiday release. Because maybe a delay is possible, right? And that's kind of like the big reason why we're having this discussion, because a lot of people don't expect Breath of the Wild 2 to come out this March. They expect maybe for it to be pushed to the holiday. And I'll say that looking at some of the things that have been said by different insiders, specifically I'm referring to Jeff Groh, I've seen a few of his podcasts recently, a lot of us have, and a lot of cool stuff's been coming out of that. But he was questioned on the release timing for Breath of the Wild 2, and this is not a report, okay? I am paraphrasing him here, I'm taking what he said out of context.
And he's just guessing.
He's just guessing, exactly. He's just guessing, he does not know. But if he had to, but his guess is that it's not coming out at March. He thinks it's coming out later. He thinks it's getting delayed again. And maybe that's the case. Maybe it's an internal delay that comes out closer to summer, or it is a holiday release. We don't know that. It's not being reported that, right? So I just want to make that clear. It's not like he's saying, hey, I heard.
Oh, yeah. My sources said, like, no.
No, that's just his personal thought.
And to be clear, Jeff Grubb has made it clear before, he has no sources at Nintendo Japan. He's got 0. And that's where this game's being made. So all of his sources would come from Nintendo of America, and they don't know. If
you think about the things that we have learned about from different insiders, such as Jeff Grubb and Emily Rogers, like, it'd be interesting to kind of go back and look at it. But so, for example, we got like 3D All-Stars. 3D All-Stars is not made in Japan, right? Those are old games that were put together by, I believe, a small team in Europe. Metroid Dread was made by Mercury Steam, a small developer in Spain. Pikmin 3 Deluxe, I don't know where that was made, but it's, again, the point is it's not a brand new game, right? It's a small team probably put it together. And Twilight Princess Wind Waker HD also made years ago by teams that aren't from Japan. So whoever's putting it together now,
Tantalus or Grezzo might be porting those.
Yeah, where are they located? I don't think they're in Japan, are they?
Tantalus is in Australia. They're the ones that did Twilight Princess HD originally.
And Grezzo,
I think Grezzo actually is in Japan.
Maybe they are. Yeah.
Pretty sure Grezzo is.
Yes,
and Grezzo made Triforce Heroes, so they've already done the original Zelda before.
But regardless, the main point here is that they're probably not going to be developing these titles again. It's going to be an even smaller team because the games are done. You just need to adapt them for Switch. So point is, all of these things that we're hearing about behind the scenes, to Nate's point, actually, they're not like coming from Nintendo of Japan, right? Like it seems like wherever the leaks are coming from, it ain't Japan. It's somewhere else, and there's usually smaller things that we learn about.
So one thing that has been talked about happening this month that could maybe, and this might be why Jeff is starting to form this opinion, maybe Breath of the Wild 2 is going to be delayed. Like, it's going to become the holiday game, or it's going to be a summer game for some reason. Would be the timing of releasing Twilight Princess and Wind Waker HD.
Yeah.
Which he has been big on saying they were coming since last year. So I know a lot of people just don't even care what he says about it, because he's been saying like every direct we're supposed to get it. So I get that. But then his co-partner on Last of the Nintendo said, hey, my independent sources are now telling me it's coming we're getting it this, like, we're very confident they're getting announced.
And I want to speak on that for a brief moment. Yeah, I want to speak on that for a brief moment, because thinking about I don't think he's ever reported before a specific direct. He just said, hey, it's bound to come. I know they're made. And it's just kind of been more like surmising that they're bound to be announced soon, right?
Yeah.
Now it's actually the distinction here, the important distinction made here is that now the sources are telling him it is going to be announced in September in a direct. That's what's being said. Yes. So there's a big difference there.
And that's important to clarify with the Breath of the Wild 2 name drop as well. He's not saying it's going to be there.
It's been suggested.
It's been suggested so to
he's
him
not reporting
that it will be. Versus the Wind Waker Twilight Princess HD, it's going to be there. Period. We're done.
Exactly.
Even the Metroid Prime remaster supposedly said, hey, no one's actually talking to me about it right now, but I know it exists and it's coming out this holiday. So if they don't announce it now, I'd be surprised. And that's been his stance this whole time is, I have no update on that game, but if it's coming out this holiday, why it has to be announced now, or there's no one. I mean, I guess it could be a Twitter drop, I think is something he mentioned. He's like, this is Nintendo, you don't know what they're going to do. It could not be there. Then 2 weeks later, it's a Twitter drop.
Yeah. So that's where, it definitely, there's some leeway there.
But with the Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD, if they do come out, say this holiday, or say even they're announced now, but then Nintendo decides, hey, these are going to be our January game. Like, we always have something in January. We're going to kick it off with this. It's like, well, that's a really short time period from that to Breath of the Wild 2 early in the year.
Yeah.
And that might make sense then to be like, oh, well, they already know internally Breath of the Wild 2 is going to be delayed to holiday. Let's drop these Zelda games in between. And maybe that's where Jeff Grubb's coming from, saying, hey, that is kind of a short release setting.
Yep.
But also, who knows? I mean, Nintendo very rarely gives us windows for release that aren't an entire year. With Zelda, it's always been, it's coming out 2022. Or like 2015, back in 2014 when they unveiled. Oh, it was a 2015 date revealed. Okay, but no idea in 2015. This is the first time they've said, nope, it's spring of this year, and we already had it announced for this year, which means we already thought we could complete it for this holiday season. We just need a little bit of extra time. Well, a little bit of extra time would fit spring. I also know that Japan recently reopened their full tourism, and basically means they're lifting all their COVID restrictions, which means it's highly likely the Zelda team's back in office.
They're probably getting stuff done.
Been nothing but proven in the past to speed up development. So,
and since we're talking about that, it should be brought up that a few months ago we did get that report that the Spanish voice actors. I think it was Spanish. I could be misremembering, but it was one of the languages for Breath of the Wild. It
was Spanish. Yeah.
The voice we got a report that they already did voice work for Breath of the Wild too. So, like, that's not even a rumor. That's just like fact. So if that is the case, now, okay, it's fact that person said it. It's fact that person said it, okay?
I'm sure Nintendo wasn't very happy. That person might not be back next time.
I don't think we've even heard any sort of...
They've been silent since, and I think there's a good reason for it. I'm pretty sure that Nintendo, they don't like things coming out like that.
Yeah, but I don't think they've ever clarified. They never like went back on it. Is a point I'm trying to make. I don't remember hearing a report that they went back on it. So it's like, oh, I was just talking about
another point with voice acting. So, and I can say this because he talked about it publicly. Mike Odyssey was going to interview all the voice actors for Breath of the Wild and have them on his podcast, and it got canceled because he accidentally mentioned the voice actors from Breath of the Wild 2 in an ad for it, and they got really mad and freaked out on him because there hasn't been any announcement of those voice actors coming back for Breath of the Wild 2. And Mike kind of threw it out there, even though he didn't know either. He's been talking about Breath of the Wild 2 a lot, so it just kind of slipped out when he said Breath of the Wild 2 just kind of flew out of his mouth. And they got and the voice acting managing company freaked out because they said you are leaking things, and then canceled on him.
Yeah, I mean they got to be really careful about that.
Which tells me, well, the voice acting for it in English must also be done as well.
So, and for those who are unaware, when voice acting is done, that's done pretty much towards the end of development. Like, we are in the last final stretch of the development here. Like, think about it, right? Like, if they're already recording voices, that means they've already probably done the animations, and they know the moments when characters are going to be talking in big main scenes. Like, so everything's been pieced together. Not to mention, this is story stuff, right? Something else to consider. In general, stories done late into development for Zelda games as well, because they don't build Zelda games based off a story idea. They build Zelda games based off gameplay ideas, and then they build a story around that after the fact. Yep. So this is all pointing towards the game being very late into development, especially because we already thought it was going to come out 2022 before they announced the delay.
Also, one thing we know from the voice actors of the English version is they've been on a lot of podcasts over the years, and they put out there that they were done recording their voices in the middle of 2015. And the game was supposed to come out in 2015, then it was delayed for Switch. So, again, I know people are like, oh, well, that was still a year plus from. I'm like, yeah, that was a unique situation where they decided, hey, Wii U ain't cutting it. We're not releasing this $200 million game on Wii U. We got to do something else.
They delayed the game for another system.
Yeah.
Which brings me to another point I want to talk about. I'm waiting for the smirk. There's a smirk. I got the smirk. Okay.
I already know where it's going.
Well, it had to go this way because
I brought it up.
We have to talk about all angles here. And the fact of the matter is that at some point or another there will be new hardware. And
no.
Yeah.
No, never. No, never. And Switch for life.
And the other fact to consider here is that mainline Zelda games have been used to push hardware for years. Let's talk about it very briefly. Breath of the Wild, the Switch. Link's Awakening Remake, Switch Lite. Let's see here. The Nintendo Wii, Twilight Princess. The new Nintendo 3DS, Majora's Mask 3D. There's a history of using a major Zelda game in tandem with a system coming out.
The 3DS itself, while it didn't launch with the Zelda, it was the Ocarina of Time 3D landed 3 months.
It came out soon. It was a launch window game. It was
like the only game people bought it early.
Oh yeah, it was they should have released it day and date, but it should have
been launched.
But that's just how things materialize.
2020.
Yeah. But anyways, point is, there's a history of Nintendo using big Zelda games to push new hardware. And this kind of brings you to some things that have been said by Nate the Hate or Direct Feed Games. Most of this talk happens from his Nate the Hate profile. But if you can go to his Twitter, just check his tweets and replies. He's been in several threads, and people are asking, "Oh, do you still think Switch Pro is happening? Oh, do you think Breath of the Wild 2 is getting delayed?" He says, "No, I don't think it's getting delayed."
He responds to everyone.
Yeah, he's responsive, and basically, and again, I'm like combining thoughts here, right? So I implore you to check the actual page. I'll link it in the description below. But the overall sentiment, I believe, is that he thinks new hardware is coming out in the first half of next year, and he doesn't think Breath of the Wild 2 is getting delayed. And what that suggests, when you consider both those viewpoints, is that he believes that Breath of the Wild 2 and this new hardware are coming around the same time. So, one, that means, okay, the spring timing, right? Now, the spring timing doesn't have to mean March. It could mean as late as early June. And the same thing applies for the hardware. But if we break it down in terms of what's most likely, considering the history of things, what's most likely is that new hardware and a big new game are going to come out together or close together
around the same time,
around before the end of the fiscal year. They always do this. They always bring out major stuff to close out the fiscal year. You don't see the biggest, best games come out in April. That doesn't happen. They come out, if they missed a holiday, they're coming out February or March. Like, that's kind of how it works across the industry. Am I wrong?
No, I mean, you're pretty right. God, when did Elden Ring? Because that was the big one earlier.
February?
Yeah. So
I'm guessing. I have to double check.
I'm guessing
but
Elden Ring release date. I don't remember.
I think it was spring, unless it was delayed to March.
It was February. You were dead on. February 25th.
There you go.
So that was kind of unusual to have a big game drop in February. Of course, then we had Legends Arceus drop in January, which is also a bit unusual. Although Nintendo, again, has had something in January almost every year. Yeah, it kind of feels like most of the industry sort of treats like you have the April, March area to drop a big game, or you have anywhere from September to November to drop a big game. And that seems to be the general 2 times that the whole industry does it. Nintendo's
February,
a little
March,
different.
not April, March, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then Nintendo's a little different. They treat it as we have 3 major release periods. We have our beginning of the year, usually running January to March. Somewhere in there, we're dropping something, typically in March. Last year, they kind of hit us in January and March. Or this year, I guess I should say. And then late summer, July, August, they always have something.
Yeah.
They always have something. And then everything from September on, Nintendo will drop like 4 games. Because that's just what they do.
Yeah.
So they still treat the holiday period as the biggest period, but they have big games dropping at 3 separate times during the year. And ironically enough, it kind of all fits around. If you look at when do they usually have directs? February, June, September. And everything is kind of slotted how they release.
It's kind of like
around
Nintendo's earlier focus was Pokemon and Kirby, right?
Yep.
January and March. And then Nintendo's summer focus is Xenoblade and Splatoon 3. Right, yeah. Those are both games that got specific directs.
And if all these remasters get announced for this holiday, dude, that's so many games coming out.
And I'm willing to bet that the holiday focus is gonna be Metroid and Pokemon. We'll see, right?
Can't forget Sparks of Hope.
Oh, so yeah, got Sparks of Hope and Bayonetta 3, right? So it's kind of like the Metroid thing that we think is happening, rumored, we don't know, and also in tandem with Bayonetta and Mario Rabbids. In conjunction with Pokemon, that's kind of like Nintendo is like sort of, all right, this is what we're putting out for holiday.
I don't need to see a bald Jeff Grubb.
Yeah.
He bet his hair.
That would be a real loss, man. I mean, that hair is a treasure.
That might be one of the greatest regretted bets ever. If Prime Remastered.
I mean, does anyone want to see him lose his hair? Like, I feel like
I don't think anybody. His hair is great.
Who would want that? Like, no one wants to see that. Right?
But that lets you know how confident he is. Unless he really wants to cut it off, and he's just like, guys, I wanted to cut it off anyways. But
maybe he'll just cut like a piece. I don't know. I think it's for his sake and for all of his sakes. I think I'm hoping he's
remaster better come out.
Yeah. But I mean, it does feel like things are lining up for that, right? Sure. But let's kind
20th anniversary of Metroid Prime, by the way.
Yeah,
happens this year in November. Yeah. So. It's actually a good time if you want to think just anniversary-wise. Not that Nintendo's always cared about anniversaries. But you just had Metroid Dread last year. Hey, keep the Metroid momentum. Don't let people forget about Metroid.
Yeah.
Around this time of year, we were thinking Metroid again. All right, we'll throw out a Metroid.
But let me go back for a bit just to kind of tie a little bit of a ribbon on the hardware situation. Don't be afraid to talk about it, by the way, right? I think here on my channel, I try to be forthcoming, right? So if there's something I think or believe, I'm going to mention it. I will say.
You were just talking about how you're losing subscribers. I'm trying not to add to the loss.
No. Okay, so when we were talking about losing subscribers, I was just talking about YouTube just kicking subscribers, right? Like, I just expect that to happen. Like, it's not has nothing to do with what I say or do.
You can see the metrics on the subscribers they kicked versus ones that just clicked unsubscribe.
I don't know.
I used to assume YouTube was just booting them. No, YouTube's only booted like 100 this year, and I've lost like 800. So,
yeah, I don't know. I know there's more of a gain than a loss, so I'm not really concerned about it.
Every time I talk to a pro, I lose. That's the way it is. People don't like it.
Whatever.
People are frustrated.
But
you know what it is? People want it, and they're frustrated it's not here. And there was so much smoke around it last year. And when we got the OLED, everyone's like, "Screw anyone who talks about this again."
Yeah, let's hone in on this for a moment. We call it Switch Pro just because that's kind of like what's been used.
Yeah.
For all intents and purposes, it may as well be a sequel Switch. We don't know what it's gonna be. Maybe it's not March, maybe it's late holiday, maybe it's next year, and that's kind of where there's this discussion, right? Because depending on when that comes out, that does make you wonder what is Nintendo gonna release alongside of it, because they're not gonna just release it with nothing. They could, but historically that's been a mistake. They've seen a lot of success in the last few generations having something paired with their hardware. So when that happens, whenever that happens, that it's gonna make a difference. So it makes you wonder. Maybe this new hardware is coming out in March, because the other thing to consider, right, is that maybe Breath of the Wild 2 was delayed to spring because of this new hardware. You know, and I remember we talked about this when the news came out that Breath of the Wild 2 was getting delayed, because if we factor in the voice acting reports, for all intents and purposes, we should have thought that Breath of the Wild 2 was ready for 2022. Like, there wasn't really much reason to think it would get delayed, beyond just Zelda games get delayed, or they want to save it for new hardware. So, you know, maybe it was specifically delayed to spring for this new hardware. That is a possibility. And if that is what's happening, I think that obviously strengthens the argument of Breath of the Wild 2 coming out in the spring, because it was already gonna be ready hypothetically for holiday. We don't know that, but you know, that's one of the possibilities there. So just kind of saying to consider on that. We don't know if there's new hardware coming. But something I've kind of talked about before, though, the reason why, for the most part, I haven't believed that new hardware would come out this year is because we got OLED last year, right? And if you look at how we've gotten new hardware throughout the Switch era, we started with the Switch in 2017, wait until 2019, then we wait till 2021 to get the OLED, right?
Do you think OLED was supposed to be the Pro because of manufacturing?
I don't know. I think there's just so many ways things could have transpired.
Like with the Pro, just to kind of talk about it just for a second, do you think there's going to be any major changes to the actual, that the chipset, sure, whatever, internals will change, but do you think the chassis, the OLED screen, any of that stuff is actually going to change for this system?
Are you asking me if I think it's going to basically look like an OLED?
Yeah, basically on the outside. Like, they're not going to make any real big external changes.
That's tough, because I feel like the Switch system looks so basic. I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just kind of, it is like there's. Well, I mean, it's not like a GameCube. It's like a purple cube with a handle.
It's meant to look basic.
It's streamlined, right? It's a streamlined, very like, you know, minimalist side of style, and which I prefer. So I don't even really know what they would do to distinguish it beyond just like a logo on the back and just better hardware internally. Like, so I don't expect anything significant, especially because if this is going to be sort of compatible with the normal Switch and normal Switch games already, like, I just don't expect that significant of a difference. I just don't. But I want to kind of go move on from the hardware side, unless there's something else you want to mention for that, because we don't know if we're getting new hardware, but I think it can happen because there's been gaps, and it not happening in 2022 makes sense, but it happening in 2023 holds water. Now, I might have expected it to come out a little bit later into 2023, but I feel like, you know, March 2023 is enough of a gap between it and OLED for it to be fine. So definitely, I think it's in the cards. But another reason why people have been sort of thinking Breath of the Wild 2 is getting delayed is because if we are getting Wind Waker HD and Twilight Princess HD, as we brought up earlier, when do they come out? Because if they're coming out January, then yeah, I mean, I wouldn't expect Breath of the Wild 2 to come out in March. Now, again, going back to that spring timing, maybe that spring timing doesn't mean March. Maybe it means like May or June. That's possible.
Do you think, okay, if they're so, let's say we do see Breath of the Wild 2 and they do get the title reveal, you think that they would also just give the release date and say screw it?
I have a hard time believing they wouldn't.
Because like if the title is such a spoiler, well, the release date's the only other thing people really want to know.
I think they have to give us a release date at this point. And maybe I'm mistaken on that. I mean,
Nintendo can do what they want, but
Splatoon. Well, if the game's coming out March,
we knew Splatoon's release date like a bit ago, but I know it's ended up swapping with. It
ended up
Xeno.
swapping, but they gave us. Well, for example, when we got Xenoblade Chronicles 3 announced in February, they gave us a release date. We knew. It was about a half a year window.
5 months early.
So about a half a year window, right? We're at that half year window now, hypothetically, for Breath of the Wild 2. So if it is coming out March, we're getting a release date. And actually, I would even argue, even if it's not coming out March, we should still get a release date, because Breath of the Wild 2 is the kind of game that deserves an even bigger sort of window. So
Nintendo also might not care. Nintendo's gonna Nintendo. I mean, Bayonetta 3 just being a random drop on social media was really, really weird.
It was.
I know that that's not on the level of Zelda. Not even close.
Yeah.
But it's still like that. Hey, that was a game people were waiting. They thought would be in a direct, and they're like, no, you know what? We'll just give you the date random.
Yeah. I mean, we knew of its existence already, so we already had trailers of actually an extended trailer of its gameplay. So it would be weird for Nintendo to shadow drop a Breath of the Wild 2 trailer with the release date, but I would take it.
I think it would be. I mean, just getting the title's enough for me. I want to see more footage, but if the title's a spoiler, then that means we're probably going to see whatever the spoiler is in the trailer.
If they're giving us a title, I don't know.
If Zelda's playable, that would be in the trailer, and that could be the spoiler of the title, as an example. I'm not saying that, by the way, I'm not saying Zelda's playable, guys. I'm just pointing out, like, if there was something they were hiding
something
like that,
hype. Yeah.
some big, and the title would give it away, well, then they're just going to show
The Legend of Zelda, playable Zelda. That's what it's called. I think, maybe you're right. Maybe they just give us a title and not a release date. And maybe they save a release date and announce it for, say, the Game Awards.
Maybe they go join us soon for more information. And then the release date's the soon. No idea what that means. Zelda Direct coming up? Do we have that happening?
Yeah.
Is there going to be the Game Awards? Like, what?
Yeah, so I think if they don't give us a release date, I agree with you there. Like a more detailed
thing. Hey, we're going to talk more about this soon.
Yeah.
Which means usually within 3 months, 4 months max, we're going to hear something. So
yeah, but before we close things out, I want to touch on this other consideration. This is going back to the Twilight Princess Wind Waker HD thing. If they come out January, yeah, I think the game's getting delayed, right? And we're going to find out, hopefully within a couple weeks, what's actually happening. But I also think there's a possibility that these games actually come out really soon. And I don't want to be the guy that overhypes people for no reason, but I feel like this situation regarding Twilight Princess and Wind Waker HD is very, very similar to the situation with 3D All-Stars. So what happened with 3D All-Stars? Back in 2020, a year where there weren't too many directs, but there were partner showcases instead, where we didn't have a lot of big releases, kind of like a lot of people started to pin their hopes on the 3D All-Stars rumor, which was discussed by a number of insiders, including Jeff Grubb. And this is kind of talked about throughout the year, and there was this confidence that it is happening. Fret not, it is happening. But it was supposed to happen for the 35th anniversary of Mario. We were going into September. We knew nothing. And once we were already in September, it was very hard for people to believe that the Super Mario 3D All-Stars thing was either real or actually happening on time. Because we were already in September and we didn't have a trailer for it, we never released it, we had nothing. But what happened in September? We got the 35th anniversary Mario Direct, and there they announced 3D All-Stars, and it came out 2 weeks later. Which to me was just mind-boggling to think that we could have that short of a window. But I think for something like 3D All-Stars, where it's a sort of a basic remastered compilation of 3 games that are famous and have been around for generations and asked for for years and people have been talking about all throughout the year, like that was a situation where it was going to work out because Mario's going to sell and everyone knows about it. So let's look at Twilight Princess and Wind Waker HD. They are games that have been around for generations, that have been asked for years, that have been rumored for years, and we've been kind of just waiting on when they're going to be announced, when are they going to happen. And we're not even talking about reworkings of these games. These games have already been reworked. We're basically we're pretty much are asking for straight ports here just together. And I think in that way, it's very similar to 3D All-Stars. Yes, there's a debate of maybe they come out separately or what have you, but it's a very similar situation. And I think that Nintendo conceivably could announce them in a direct, say on September 14th or something, and they come out 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later at the end of September or early October, and it would work. If that happens, then I think we are in a position where Breath of the Wild 2 can still come out, say, at late March, because we're talking about a half-year gap between these projects. But that's kind of it. Like, if it takes longer, like if we're talking December, January, at that point, I think that's too close to the release of Breath of the Wild 2, in my opinion. Now, we've had situations like, say, for example, New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, which came out in January, and then Mario Maker came out, I want to say, May or June.
I think it was June.
Very similar products. Both based off 2D Mario gameplay, and they came out within half a year of each other. So, something like that has happened. You look at just like not even a year ago, Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl came out in November, and then another Pokemon game made by Pokemon, like another mainline game, came out in January. So we have seen situations where, the same franchise has two releases in a relatively short window of time. I don't think we'll see Wind Waker and Twilight Princess come out within 3 months of Breath of the Wild 2, but I can see 5 to 6. So that's what I'm kind of thinking. I'm hoping it comes out sooner, but if not, I am thinking the game is going to come out later. Breath of the Wild 2.
Cool. Just playing a smidge of devil's advocate.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think 3D All-Stars was supposed to be announced in September. I'm pretty sure it was supposed to be E3, but there was no E3. And then I also will say that was also a very unique situation because they didn't have a big holiday game besides like Age of Calamity. And
yeah.
I don't even know if we knew about Age of Calamity yet at that point.
Didn't. It was announced
so
like a week later.
We needed something big, and 3D All-Stars was that big holiday game. So I think just keeping that in mind, they're not in that situation now. They already got a bunch of big games coming. They don't actually even need, I would argue they don't need anything else for this holiday. I want more, but we don't actually need it. Between Bayonetta 3 and Pokemon and we just have Splatoon. I guess you can argue sort of kicks it off. And then we have Mario plus Rabbids, Sparks of Hope. Like that's already a bunch of big titles that we don't necessarily need. They could conceivably slot more in there. I don't know that we need it. If they slot Zelda into December, which is something I've speculated on my channel where I thought maybe December, because they seemingly always have something in December. Kind of weird. They're the only company that just, hey, we actually are going to release something in December.
So if they come out December, do you think Breath of the Wild 2 still comes out March?
I think it's still possible, yeah. I don't think that's inconceivable. They come out
January.
early December. If they want to wait till after the Pokemon wave and then drop the Zelda early
3
December.
3 months might be just long enough where I might think that works.
Well, it's one of those beginning of December, end of March. That's almost 4 months. So It's kind of that borderline, but also we're talking hypothetically. I don't really know what the hell Nintendo's going to do.
Right.
And if there's new hardware coming, it's completely irrelevant anyways. If they're planning to launch it with new hardware, when's the new hardware ready? When do we have enough in stores? Maybe that's why it's delayed, because the new hardware couldn't come out this holiday. It's not actually delayed because Zelda needed more time. It's because they needed more time for the hardware. I have no idea. It's all... There's so many things that could be at play because, to your point you mentioned earlier, Zelda keeps coming out around hardware releases. It's just a fact. It just keeps happening. Wii U is like the exception, not the rule. So
then they also, by the way, they used a Zelda tech demo to hype up the Wii U.
Yes.
So
yes, they did.
So like they should have either delayed Skyward Sword.
It's one of those
Wii U or had other Zelda ready.
I mean, Breath of the Wild 2 is either going to be the best-selling or second best-selling Zelda game of all time. It's crossing 10 million. I don't think that's even a question.
Yeah.
So knowing that that's going to be the second or the potentially biggest Zelda game ever released, they're not going to squander it by just saying, hey, you know what? Let's not do anything special around it. And I swear, Nintendo, I'm talking to you guys now. You release a new platform with this Switch, and I don't get a custom Zelda version, there's going to be war. I'm so tired that one of the best-selling games on your platform does not have a special edition. Well, some Skyward Sword Joy-Con. Okay, look what you did for Splatoon 3 OLED.
At least give us like a special Pro controller.
We had a special edition Wii U, for crying out loud. For Wind Waker, we had a special edition Wii U. Like, Breath of the Wild 2 can't get a special edition, then you're doing something wrong. I'm sorry, that's just my rant. I like collecting systems, but I really want, didn't buy the Splatoon 3 OLED because I'm like, no, there will be a Zelda one. It's gonna happen. I have to believe.
Would you take a Zelda themed Switch OLED or would you take a Switch Pro?
I'll take either one.
Okay.
Either one.
So
now, if they release new hardware and a themed OLED at the same time, a themed OLED's never coming out of the box besides an unboxing video. Otherwise, it's going up on the shelf and I'll just play on the new platform. But I'll still buy it for collector's purposes.
I want to close things out here, unless there's something dramatic you want to bring up.
I'm good, and plus my kid's over here waiting for me to get off, apparently.
Okay, all right, so I think we've kind of covered our bases, but to close things out, what do you think is happening? Like, what do you actually think is going to happen? Or rather, you may not be entirely confident about it like me. Just give me your best guess.
Okay, Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD release in December. Breath of the Wild 2. I know earlier I was saying I'm kind of confident on that end of March, but I'm not sold on it. I'm just gonna stick with end of March, December for Twilight Princess, early December for Twilight Princess Wind Waker, like first week, whatever the first Friday is.
You do think they're coming out together as one?
Yeah, I think they're gonna be a combo pack. But by the way, Jeff Grubb is neither confirmed or denied. He has no idea how they're gonna handle the release of them. And I know RGT85 put forth an idea today that maybe it's Nintendo's first $70, where they package them together for 70 instead of 60. I have no idea. That's just speculation. Yeah, I think that's gonna. I don't think it's getting delayed. I honestly think Breath of the Wild 2 is already done. I think they're working on DLC right now. I think the game is done, and I think it's been done. And the delay had nothing to do with not being ready this year. It could have been. I think there's two things the delay could have been for. One, because they're releasing it with hardware. They're not going to have enough units for this holiday, so it got pushed. Yeah,
they didn't say they were delaying it because to like polish it up. They just decided to do it.
Yeah. This is the first time they didn't say, "Oh yeah, it needs more work. We need to polish it. No, they just said it's coming. So it was a really weird delay compared to prior ones.
Yeah.
Or two, Nintendo does like to sit on games. Mario Odyssey was done for a full year before it came out. So they could go, we already have a lot of games for this holiday, but we don't have a big one for early next year. Let's push this one to be the big one for early next year.
I think there's a combination.
Those are two valid reasons to delay a game for Nintendo.
Yeah, it could be both.
Because they go, hey, look, we have new gen Pokemon, open world. We don't need Zelda at the same time. Like, we don't.
I bet
Let's
you
spread it out.
if Metroid Prime Remake was coming out for this holiday,
coming out too,
that's them putting something out to appease like more of the core-centric Nintendo audience, while also letting Pokemon.
They kind of have something for everyone this holiday if Metroid Prime comes out. So I kind of think it's one of those. It could just be we could have put it out there, and this could have been the greatest holiday season ever. But we're gonna sell out of Switches anyways, so why don't we just wait? And we'll release it later. So those I think are the two valid reasons. The third is obviously the game's not done. They need more time. And that's where you get the credence of, they could delay it further if the game isn't done yet. And I don't actually think that that's the case, but we don't know because this is one of those games that Nintendo has repeatedly told us about now on 3 separate occasions, but in between has not hinted anything.
Yeah. It's strange, right? Because, I mean, at the end of the day, this is supposed to be a sequel based off the foundation of Breath of the Wild, which we thought would have reduced the development time, but it's actually had a longer development time. I can tell you why
it feels weird. Normally, in the past, we've had E3s where even if Zelda wasn't there, Miyamoto's there, and he always gets asked about it. And so then we'd get new tidbits, and we haven't had the interviews.
We get less interviews nowadays. That is true.
We haven't had the interviews, and that's where we always get the tidbits.
Yeah, Nintendo's more distant now, right? The directs, you could argue, is a way of Nintendo being more direct with us, but also on the flip side, because there's the directs and there's less like physical events.
Yeah, I think people don't understand that E3 wasn't just about, we get gaming news. It's also, hey, there's a lot of interviews. and we're not getting game dev interviews right now, so we're not hearing anything that Nintendo doesn't want out
That
there.
was kind of cool about last year, right, where we got all those interviews from Sakamoto about Metroid Dread.
Oh,
like, that was amazing.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can't believe that was clearly a marketing technique, but that was really nice.
It was wonderful, right? And I mean, I love what they did for Breath of the Wild and the developer diary after the fact.
For people who don't know, I know some people mentioned that they miss Iwata Asks. They basically have them again. They're not called Iwata Asks, but they have developer interviews. They're doing them for like every major game now on Nintendo's website. They're not getting the same coverage they used to get, which I think that's just unfortunate. I think people just aren't aware of it.
Yeah.
This is what's happening.
That's interesting stuff.
All right. Well, thanks for having me on, bud.
Absolutely. I haven't told people what I think. Well, I mean, it's basically, I don't know.
I mean, I think you've kind of sort of already said it, but go for it.
I like to summarize, right? I like to summarize, right? So, my opinion hasn't really changed through over this discussion, right? I'm in agreement with Nate that it seems unlikely that Breath of the Wild 2 will be delayed based on what we know. You can't completely, like, dispel the idea, though, because you never really know. And also, to be clear, if it comes out June, that's technically it not getting delayed. So we should take that into consideration. But I think what makes the most sense still, even now, today, is that Breath of the Wild 2 comes out to close the fiscal year, because Nintendo usually uses big games to close the fiscal year. And in the past, whenever Nintendo has said, hey, this game's coming out spring, that's meant to close the fiscal year. So I think it's probably still coming out then. Now, how does Twilight Princess Moonbrook HD fit into that window? I do think it means the game may be coming out sooner than people expect. I'm not saying December can't be an option, right? And it's possible that maybe the games come out early next year and Breath of the Wild 2 is pushed to like June or beyond. That's possible. But if I'm gonna guess, and I'm totally prepared to be wrong here, but I'm gonna guess that the games actually are coming out way sooner than we expect. There may not be a physical version of them. Maybe it's just digital. But, well, that's the kind of thing that would sell. So there will be a physical version probably. But I do think they'll be coming out either late September or early October. And I may be crazy for saying that, but that's what I'm kind of thinking. I think Breath of the Wild 2 still comes out this March. I'm prepared to be wrong on this one, but that's what I'm kind of thinking is going to happen. So there you go. But yeah, guys, thanks for watching this discussion. Please make sure to check out Nate's channel, Nintendo Prime. It will be linked in the description below. Leave a like, check everything out, but we'll see y'all really soon. Take care. Bye.